Hello and welcome to today's episode of A Slice of Medieval. We have got one of our greatest friends joining us today, Matthew Harffy, who has worked in the IT industry where he spent all day writing and editing, just not the words that most interested him. Prior to that, he worked in Spain as an English teacher and translator, and he now lives in Wiltshire, England, with his wife and their 2 daughters, and the dog, Blue. As a child, Matthew lived in Northumberland, an area which had a great impact on him. The rugged terrain, ruined castles and rocky coastline made it easy to imagine the past. And it is from this inspiration that Matthew introduced us to Beerbrand in The Serpent's Sword. From the Bernicia Chronicles, Matthew went on to write the Time of Sword series set in the time of Charlemagne, following the adventures of Hunlaf, another Northumbrian. Matthew also co-hosts the excellent podcast, almost as good as A Slice of Medieval, Rock, Paper, Swords, with Justin Hill. And he's joining us today to talk about Hunlaf's latest adventure, Dominion of Dust, which takes us on a journey across the Mediterranean. Welcome, Matthew.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
So what attracts you to writing about the 8th and 9th centuries?
Well, there's a question. I don't know. I think... Basically, when I started writing the first book in the Time for Sword series, just based on the premise of what would happen if things were different at the attack of Lindisfarne and if the monks sort of turned around and fought back. That was kind of my initial thing. So that sort of set the time frame that I was writing about. But then as the series has progressed and Hunlaf has moved on and travelled further and wider around Europe and the known world, basically it's a time of great change. Like many points in history, I suppose if you look back at any point in history you'll find moments, but this does seem particularly rife in change and conflict. You've got the Vikings beginning, it's the beginning of the Viking Age, so it's right at the end of the 8th century. So the first book starts at 793. So you've got the Vikings coming in, which of course have a huge impact on British history but also the whole of Europe's history. You've got the rise of Charlemagne the Great, who's soon to be crowned the Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. You've got that clash, which I talk about in Dominion of Dust, between the East and West, so Byzantium and the Western Roman Empire. Of course, you've got the power of Byzantium and all of their incredibly complex intrigues and history. You've got the Al-Andalus and the rise of the Moorish power in Spain, in the Iberian Peninsula, North Africa, and of course in Dominion of Dust to go to the Middle East, and you've got the Arab states, the Muslim states, and the caliphates. Their power rising there. So you've got this amazing time of conflict between all these different factions and religions and states, which is a perfect time to write historical adventure stories.
Yeah, and I think it works really well with Dominion of Dust. It's definitely an adventure.
Thank you. You said you just finished it. I hope you enjoyed it.
I did. I just finished it yesterday morning. I thought I'd better finish it before I talk to Matthew.
So Hunlaf is, by the time we get to Dominion of Dust, what number book is that in there?
That's the 4th one.
The 4th one. He's travelled quite a lot already, hasn't he? And he's now an agent of Charlemagne, seeking holy relics, a kind of medieval Indiana Jones character. So in that period, can you give us some idea about what the attraction of those relics was?
Well, I think the real attraction was that I think probably most people, if not everybody, but most people believed they had real power. I think this is the thing. I think it's difficult to some extent. I think it's difficult for us to imagine how people believed in these things. But it was a time when people did believe in the real power of religion and in these artifacts, so icons and relics and things, anything you could trace back to having been linked to a saint or a martyr or someone. But in the case of some of the artifacts or some of the relics that people were looking for, directly related to Jesus Christ, and therefore God made man, actually being able to say this is the blood of Christ, or this was a thorn that was in the head of Jesus Christ on the cross, or a piece of the true cross, or a nail from the true cross. All of these things, of course, crop up multiple times throughout the Christendom at the time. And this is really the start of it, I think. I mean, the relics and reliquaries are a huge part of the Roman Catholic Church and their history right up to the present day, really. I mean, it's still a thing. But I think moving from sort of the early medieval right through to the sort of high medieval, it's really at its peak, and you'll have incredibly detailed reliquaries to carry these things. So you'll have like a tiny thorn encased in a piece of glass, encased in a massive thing of gold that will be on display somewhere. So they take on not just this sort of mythical, religious, magical, if you want, power, but they also have the power of the fact that they're incredibly expensive, they're gaudy, they're housed in these massive reliquaries, so they're a symbol of power as well. So whether they've got actual power or they're a symbol of power, both things are important in the early medieval period, and maybe in other times of history, but definitely then the whole perception of I'm very powerful, I'm the most powerful king in the land, because not only have I got 10,000 soldiers and all this land, I've got a piece of the true cross, I've got Jesus Christ's toenails and all these other things. And there's real things. So I think Charlemagne, there's actually part of his treasure is the spear of Longinus. So it's actually supposedly a thing, was the spear that pierced the side of Christ on the cross, and that's what they're in search. They're searching for at the beginning of the book. And of course, there's also the head of John the Baptist, which did the rounds and was in Byzantium, in Constantinople at some point in the mid 7th, 8th century, somewhere around then. It was then disappeared for a time, later to reappear somewhere else, probably in Europe.
Yeah, I think there's about 3 heads of John the Baptist, I seem to remember.
Well, that yeah, absolutely. And there's, I mean, if you counted up all the, the nails on the true cross and all the splinters, that you'd have a whole forest and a whole, thousands of nails. But originally, the story, I was going to have the story based around. So the story is based around this searching for a relic, and they're in search of the spear of Longinus, and then they end up in search of another relic later on. And what could be more powerful than something that's linked to Jesus, Christ, God made man, an actual piece of his blood or his flesh that's still around. And originally, I discovered when researching that there was a thing called the Holy Prepuce, which is a real thing, and it's Jesus Christ's foreskin, which I thought. So I was doing the research, and I found out that apparently at the time of his coronation in Rome on Christmas Day, Charlemagne gifted the Holy Prepuce, the Jesus Christ foreskin, the Holy Foreskin, to the Pope, I think it's Pope Leo, who was doing the coronation, crowning him. And he said that he'd got this in Jerusalem. And I thought, this is amazing. This is a real thing. I can write a book about this. This is great. And then I told my wife, I spent the whole day researching it. And I went and told my wife, and I was all excited. I said, I've got it. This is the book's going to be about this, the Holy Foreskin. And she just said, you can't write a book about the Holy Foreskin. It's ridiculous. Everybody's going to think you're taking the piss. It sounds like Monty Python, even though it's true. And I think at one point in history, I think there was either 16 or 18 of these Holy Foreskins around Europe. And in fact, there's a whole documentary you can find online about about the last, or the one that they thought was the most likely to be real, which whatever, was in a church somewhere in Italy, and it was spirited away and disappeared because it was just after they discovered how to do DNA testing. And they were talking about taking a piece of this, whatever it was, but possibly the foreskin of someone, maybe, whether it's Christ or not, and they were going to do DNA testing on it. And so there's a theory, there's this whole sort of intrigue whether the Vatican disappeared it because they said we don't want someone doing this and finding anything. We don't want them to find out about the reality or not of Jesus. I don't know. Anyway,
or descendants.
Very interesting. Descendants, yes, exactly. Yeah. So very interesting. But I decided in the end that maybe the holy foreskin was a bad idea as a central premise of the story. But it does still get a mention. I think I mentioned it once in passing, and it's mentioned in the historical note. But so you've got Charlemagne searching for these things because of their power, and then Irene of Athens, who's the leader of the Byzantium, the Empire of Byzantium, and the Eastern Roman Empire. She actually presided over a change to the Byzantine law, which brought back the worship of icons. So that there was a period of iconoclasm or iconoclasty. I don't know. Anyway, they were iconoclasts for a while, and they said it was you couldn't worship icons. But she actually changed the law during her reign to say, yes, we can. Let's bring back all the icons and the relics. So there's definitely the belief that relics is a powerful thing, and I've just used that then as an idea. I mean, obviously, you mentioned Indiana Jones, I think, in the question. We still think people have still thought that there's great power in these things even up to the present day, and it's a trope, isn't it, of the searching for these things that can bring you power. So I just went with it, and I thought, well, if we can suspend disbelief or if people nowadays believe it, and in the time of the Nazis, in theory they believed there was power in these things, then I'm sure people 1,000 years ago definitely did.
I think the modern reader is probably reader of things set in the medieval period is probably aware enough that these icons existed and that they were revered by individuals, by people all over Christendom. Maybe they're not quite so clued into the idea of the power that the possession of such icons would give to a ruler or an individual at the time. So it's quite an interesting point to talk about that how it conveyed some sort of authority and power, just the mere possession of one of these items.
Yeah, I think it's that. I think it's the authority as well as I think they probably, whether Charlemagne actually believed that possessing the spear of Longinus would mean that he could win battles, because I think that's the thing, is that if you got the spear of Longinus, you could win, in battle or whatever. Whether he really believed that or not, I don't know, but I'm sure he definitely thought, well, if I possess this, some people will believe it. I mean, you think about the sort of things that politicians nowadays and leaders spout, and the followers will believe, and they'll and it gives them kudos, and they say, this guy's great. He said this. He's got the spear of Longinus. He's got the head of John the Baptist. I mean, wow, he's got the true cross and a bit of Jesus's blood and whatever. All these things. They'll be thinking, well, this is the guy to follow. He's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting parallel, isn't it, with what modern politicians say, or politicians at any time, really.
Yeah, well, it always makes me wonder how much, because I think that it's very easy to fall into the thing of saying, well, I think in historical fiction we get the characters that are like atheists, and they're kind of railing against their time and say, well, I don't believe any of this. This is all rubbish, and I think that's very unlikely that there were lots of people like that. But I think there must have been a lot of people that were quite questioning, because people were not stupid. And so someone like Charlemagne, who was very educated, I'm sure he was pious and probably believed in the afterlife and believed in the church and everything. But at the same time, as an educated, intelligent person, did he really believe in all of these things, or did he just think it was a means to an end? In the same way that do politicians believe everything they say nowadays, or do they sometimes just say these things because they know that's what the masses want to hear? And we'll never know, I guess.
No, it sounds plausible though, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, just because you believe something, it doesn't mean that you don't believe that you can turn it to your advantage as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Mm.
But yeah, I must say, when I was reading Dominion of Dust, I kept thinking of Hunlaf as Indiana Hunlaf. And then I got to the historical note at the end, and you actually mentioned Indiana Jones. And I'm like, exactly! That's what I thought. It certainly gave me the impression, Indiana Hunlaf.
Well, there's a sort of it's a running theme really with the Time for Swords books, that the first one was inspired by this sort of what if question, but as it progressed more, and I thought about, what if the monks turned and fought against the Vikings in the Viking raid, I became very heavily influenced by Seven Samurai and the Magnificent Seven. So in the end, I decided to bring together these seven warriors, and so and they defend a monastery against attack. So it's very reminiscent of those films, and it's become a bit of a theme. Then I thought, well, with each of these books, maybe I can draw inspiration from a certain movie or a certain setting like that in sort of popular fiction. And so in the second book, a Night of Flames, it's very loosely based on Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness or Apocalypse Now. It's got real elements of that. So they're going up a river, but they're in Norway, and there's sort of a madman at the end, and there's all sort of things happen to them along the way. And so, and the third one, not so much. The third one, A Day of Reckoning, is set in Spain, and I sort of, very loosely, I read, I think it was, is it The Long Ships? Yeah, it's an older, written 60, 70 years ago, sort of Viking novel. And I read some of that, and there's bits of that are in Spain. I sort of loosely sort of took some of those ideas, was sort of the general sort of gist of it. But then with this new one, I thought, he's going to search for relics. Who searches for relics? There's got to be a nod. So there are some Easter eggs in these books where I've put little tiny, some of them more obvious than others, little quotes from, or little nods to the movies that they're kind of paying homage to, should we say.
I'm looking forward to the next one based on Jaws.
Well,
you never know.
You never know. Jaws is one of my favourite movies. Or
the Iliad. They're in the Mediterranean for 20 years trying to get home.
Gosh. Yeah. Well,
we'll see. That the Odyssey? That's the Odyssey, isn't it?
Yeah, the Odyssey. We'll see, because I'm terrible at forward planning, so I haven't actually planned the next book. So we'll see.
So, you have interaction between the realm of Charlemagne and the realm of Byzantium. I think we tend to be very insular in our ideas of medieval history, in that, you get this impression that people think people didn't travel and weren't so much aware of other cultures and empires. So, but Charlemagne was aware of Byzantium and vice versa, and there must have been some clashes and some communication between them.
Yeah, absolutely. There definitely was. And they were both incredibly powerful, of course, in their own right. And they disagreed in terms of religion, as we said before. I sort of mentioned the iconoclastic thing and everything. So the religions had I'm not an expert of the history of the Holy Roman Church, but they had all these sort of different schisms and changes over time, and different councils, and they agreed different things. And they had the Pope in Rome, but then they'd have the I can't think of his name,
Patriarch.
The Patriarch, that's it. The Patriarch in Constantinople. And so you'd have all these sort of vying stuff going on. So there's that going on, but then there's also, of course, the leaders of the countries. So you've got, of the empires. So you've got Charlemagne, and Irene at this point in Constantinople. And we know that Irene had tried to marry her. So she was a regent for a while. So she married Leo the Fourth, and which I was just genning up on this morning because I couldn't remember all many of the details, because we were saying before we came on air that I basically forget everything I've written after a few months, so I had to go and quickly read through the historical note. But it's interesting. I suddenly was reminding myself about Irene. I mean, she doesn't appear in the book; she's a presence that's pulling the strings, in the background. But she wasn't actually born of aristocracy. They did this thing at the time, apparently, in Constantinople, in Byzantium, where they did a kind of a beauty pageant called a bride show. And they basically just brought in front of Leo the Fourth, or maybe his advisors or his parents or whoever, just this stream of beautiful women they picked up from around the provinces, and he just picked her and said, "Oh, she's a bit all right. I'll have her." So he marries this most beautiful woman, but she turns out to be incredibly ruthless and ambitious. Probably, coming from relative obscurity, thinking I'm going to make the most of this. Now I'm like one of the most powerful people in the world. And he died. He died very, very early, very young, 5 years into his reign at the age of 30, and he left her.
He died, did he? Just died.
Well,
he didn't die after a meal, did he?
He had tuberculosis, so he was incredibly ill. So
he was ill anyway.
I think even before, but he might have been killed, because later on we'll see she was absolutely awful. So perhaps she helped him on his way. Who knows? But he had sired a child, a son and heir with her, who became Constantine VI. So, but she became regent. So this is a perfect opportunity for her. And she was incredibly ambitious, as I said, and she was also pretty cruel and horrible. And so during the 780s, she basically reigned in place of her son, who was just a child, until he got to the age of 16. And then this is when she forced him to hold the Second Council of Nicaea, and that condemned iconoclasm and changed everything back. So there's obviously the church are working through her as well. They've got all these different power struggles in Byzantium. But then she also at this point decided that she should marry her son, and he should get married to Rotruda, who is the second daughter of King Charles, so Charlemagne. So this is where the contact with the Western Roman Empire comes. So she's obviously thought, well, if we marry, my son to the daughter of Charlemagne, that unifies the two sides of the empire. We become incredibly powerful. So it would have obviously strengthened both sides, but the engagement was called off. We don't know exactly what happened. Of course, like so many things this far back in history, we don't really know. We know that there was the engagement, but it didn't happen in the end. Probably, though, it was on the initiative of the Frankish side that they called it off. And in the end, Constantine then married a young woman who, like his father, he picked from this bride show, and he plucked this woman from obscurity just because she was really beautiful. Which is, why not? If you're an emperor of Constantinople, I'm guessing you can do what you want. So anyway, his mum was not very happy about this, and she didn't like, I think, the new wife. And he then started consorting with a lady in waiting as well called Theodota, and he sent Maria, his wife, off to a monastery, and he married this new consort. But this was a terrible controversy for the Orthodox Church, and there's bigamy, and they said this is bigamy. It was dreadful. And anyway, Irene sided with the church. She condemned her son. Eventually, long story short, she basically takes her son, pokes his eyes out, sticks him away in somewhere to die. He disappears basically. But apparently, he's going to live holed up somewhere and just be. And his wife, apparently, or his lover at this point, I'm not sure. His new lover wife says, I'll join him, I'll be bricked up with him somewhere. But anyway, they both disappear from the record. And Irene then rules in her own right. And at some point in the next couple of years, she then tries to marry Charlemagne. She sends missives and messengers across and says, let's get married. Now let's us tie the knot, and we'll we'll create a powerful union. Together we can rule the galaxy, kind of thing. But I don't know why. I mean, maybe the fact that she just had her son's eyes gouged out, but Charlemagne said, yeah, maybe not. Maybe we'll give that one a miss. But you can imagine at this point, she wasn't too happy about it, and she doesn't sound like she's got a great temper. So this is why I thought at this point the rejection has created this real rivalry, and she's decided, okay, well, if you're not going to marry me, I'm going to screw you over. I'm going to get all the relics I can. I'm going to become the overall power of the whole of the Roman Empire, which, well, did it work? I mean, we've heard of Charlemagne, but
Yeah.
we heard of her. So maybe not. But anyway, so yeah, I thought so. She sounds like a bit of a horrible person, to be perfectly frank. I mean, people were ruthless at this time, but to be that ruthless to your own child takes it up a pretty, takes up another step. And she's not the only ruler to kill or maim their children, but it's pretty awful. And I think it's, in some ways, maybe this is sexist, but it sounds even worse when it's a mother to the child. It's like even more unusual. I mean, you hear about it, kings will war with their sons and things, but for a mother to order the mutilation and probably murder of her son, it's pretty horrendous. But anyway.
It's usually the other way around, isn't it? It's usually the father jealous of the son's possible
burgeoning power. Yeah. So pretty awful. And just talking about the communication with other empires and other places, of course, we also know that Charlemagne, whilst fighting wars in Al-Andalus, in the Iberian Peninsula, against the Moorish, against the Moors there, he also sent embassies to the Caliphate of Harun al-Rashid to Baghdad, and so trade was going on across everywhere, and they're very pragmatic. So I think although it's like, we totally disagree, and I'm going to fight wars with you, it's like a holy crusade against you against the Muslims. I'm also going to have trade deals with you because very similar to modern day.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
I really do think we cannot speak about Dominion of Dust without talking about Abul Abbas.
Well, Abul Abbas is this he's an interesting figure in the book that keeps getting mentioned, and he's a real character who I don't want to spoil it for anyone reading the book that doesn't know who Abul Abbas is, but he's a real character. If you're going to read the book, then you can skip the next sort of minute or so of this, and I'll drop a spoiler. I'll drop a spoiler in, so click forward, 60 seconds, but basically Abul Abbas is an elephant, and he gets brought back by a Jewish emissary that was sent from Charlemagne, and he gets brought back from as a gift to Charlemagne from the Caliph, whatever I said his name was, I can't remember now, Harun al-Rashid. He's got a much longer name than that, but anyway, yes. So he sends back this gift, and of course, Hunlaf and co meet Abul Abbas on the journey, and are quite surprised to learn exactly what he is and who he is.
I thought that scene was very well depicted, because I think I worked it out at the same point that Hunlaf did. Brilliant.
Well, yes, I mean it's quite a surprise, I think. I tried to make it a surprise because I just thought, what an unusual situation. And you have these when you're researching a book and you read these things and you think, well, that's really bizarre. And then and that he came back to Europe and he lived happily in Aachen in Germany for 8 years or something before dying. It's all a bit.
And then I'm thinking, Hunlaf must have been very relieved that he didn't ask for a lift on the boat. Take me back, take me to Germany a bit quicker, because they would have had to walk all that way as well with this elephant. It's a heck of an undertaking to get an elephant from the Middle East to Germany.
And it went from I think it took them about 4 years or something to get back to Aachen. So they must have travelled the long way round. I don't think we really know exactly the route they took. I think there's some mention of them going to like North Africa and maybe getting a ship across somewhere, but I don't know. I mean, it's all a bit of a mystery.
You mentioned finding things in research. How easy did you actually find researching this whole book? Because there's a lot of areas that you're looking at in that period, aren't there?
And well, not easy is the answer. And then there's always a point when I just think, like, do I know enough now just to write the story and just get on with it? I think that point, it's always difficult to know when that point is, but I think there's always a tendency just to keep researching, keep researching. I keep researching. I'm doing that at the moment with a new book, and we can talk about that maybe in a bit. But I've made a mistake. I've made a rod for my own back in the last few books when it seems like each new book has been a new location or a new culture, a new set of values and history to learn. And I sort of make the mistake of thinking, oh, it's not going to be too bad. And then when you start, you think, oh my God, there's just so much to learn, so much to cram and understand. And then, of course, I have this moment of thinking, well, it's actually, you don't need to understand everything. You don't need to know everything. You just need to know enough to make it believable. And I think lots of it is is researching the sort of nitty gritty little bits of detail. And so with things like, obviously got to get the general understanding of what was happening they go to Jerusalem and what was happening with Jerusalem at the time. It's a contested place and has been since just before this series of books. Of course, this is Islam only starts in the 7th century. So this is set in 8th century. So it's only been 150 years or something since the beginning of Islam. And so you've got to sort of get the context of where it is. But obviously Jerusalem was a holy city for Christians and for the Jews and for the Muslims as well. And it was contested. At this point, it was relatively peaceful, but it was under the control of the caliphate. And so trying to understand what that's like and then sort of making parallels with later in history. And I think one of the things that I do, or two things, is research the period, but also look later in history for sort of first-hand accounts of things that you can extrapolate backwards, that you think, well, that won't have changed too much. So later on in history, there were a lot of pilgrimages to Jerusalem. Not so many. There were, because Charlemagne went at this time to Jerusalem, so there were pilgrimages to Jerusalem at this point. But there were many more later in the medieval period, in the sort of high medieval, and people have written accounts of those things. So I could pull on those accounts of things. Okay, well, the travel arrangements and what the places look like or where they traveled are going to be very similar things. I can draw on those. So I do that, and even like researching some of the little details of life in like the Bedouin camps and the Bedouin tents and what that's like. You can find stuff that's written in the 19th century, by people that visited, or even modern day. Like now, there are people that write blogs. Bedouin people. There's something like 25 million Bedouin are still around, dispersed over all of wherever they are, the Syrian desert, the Arabian desert, and all over West Asia and North Africa. There's something like 25 million Bedouin. And so some of them have got blogs and they've got, websites and things, and they talk about, how they make their marmara tea and what they drink and what they eat and some of their customs. And so you can think, well, I'm sure these things are going to be similar. They may have changed drastically, but it's the idea. At the end of the day, you want it to feel real and feel authentic. And so if I read an account of somebody in the early 19th century or mid 19th century traveling to Jerusalem and what the Bedouins were like, and seeing some old photos from like the late 19th century, I would then sort of take that and think, okay, I can push that into the book and make that feel authentic and real. And nobody's going to be able to tell me that it's wrong, because nobody was around 1,200 years ago, or whatever it was.
How very Ridley Scott of you.
Well, I'd like to think I do a little bit more research than Ridley Scott does, but I do understand what he means, though. I totally disagree with him when it comes to things like totally breaking historical accuracy. If you know that something is historically inaccurate, it seems ridiculous to do it. And I think that he doesn't care. He doesn't seem to care. So he'll say, oh, I want to put sharks in the Colosseum, I'm just going to do it. But how would they do it? Well, I don't care. It just looks good, so I'm going to do it. But the battle wasn't like that in Napoleon. Napoleon didn't fight on in this way. Oh, I don't care. It looks good, and I want to blow up a horse or something. I'm going to do it. So, but that's ridiculous. But if you don't know what the historical detail was, and you're trying to add a bit of detail, I don't have a problem with that, because I think you're trying to create a world of depth and authenticity. So if you travel to Middle East now and you stay in a tent and something happens to you and you put that into the book, and as if it had happened 1,200 years ago, there's every reasonable expectation that could have happened and could have been like that.
I think that's the thing, isn't it? Like you say, it's getting the atmosphere right. rather than putting trenches and Waterloo, which is just like, seriously.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And so I think I think
Yeah.
the idea of historical fiction is always to, and maybe Ridley Scott sometimes ticks this box. And I think maybe in Gladiator he did this, even though we know historically it was very inaccurate in many ways. But I think in Gladiator, the reason it's so much better than Napoleon is that it gives the feeling of authenticity. So even though you're watching it, and even like films like Braveheart to some extent, I know loads of historians will be saying, "Oh, Braveheart's dreadful," but when you watch the film, even though you know, if you start delving into the story, you know that lots of it's total rubbish. It still gives the impression of being real, and you can sort of believe that if you travel through time, it might have been something like that. It doesn't feel complete rubbish, and it sort of fits together in a realistic melange of sort of settings and atmosphere and costume. It sort of has a feeling of authenticity. And
unlike King and Conqueror, because you cannot believe that Harold can get out of a bath and still have a dirty face.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. Well, yes. And yeah.
And that his mum didn't tell him to wash his face before his coronation and things like that. It's like, there's no authenticity there. You know, mum would have done the, get your face cleaned. You're not getting crowned with a face like that.
Well, I don't. Yeah, there's not many grown men that would actually have a bath and not wash their face. It's a bit of a strange.
The bath and his face is still muggy.
It's a bit of a strange one. It's like they had special, like in the early medieval 11th century, they had special makeup. Like we would just apply our mud makeup before we go for a walk,
and it stays in exactly the same place on his face through every single episode.
It's very strange.
So
but I think you're right that you can go really where you don't know. I mean, when I'm doing stuff in the fall of the Roman Empire period, I mean, there's so much we don't know, but there is stuff that was written at a time which describes other places or similar places, and you can, as you say, extrapolate stuff from that. You can make comparisons, and you can build up an authentic picture, or at least as authentic as anybody
and it can never be fully authentic. And so when people sometimes say to me, "I'm amazed about the amount of research you've done this book. It seems really real," and I'm always very, very flattered when people say that. But I always think, well, it's not real, and the events probably didn't happen the way I'm depicting them, because I'm often writing about events tangentially to the history. I mean, I'm creating I'm creating fictional characters in a historical setting often, and so really the historical events, I'm kind of just guessing at how they happened, and they're secondary maybe to the plot of my book. So I think, well, probably they didn't happen like that, but as long as they feel authentic, then I'm very happy if people go away feeling that. I remember when in the third book of this series, A Day of Reckoning, somebody wrote to me and said, "Oh, lots of it's set in Cordoba in the south of Spain, and Cadiz. They go from Cadiz and then to Cordoba." And somebody wrote to me and said, "It's amazing. Really, they said, I live in Andalusia, and you really capture the feeling and the smells and the." And I visited Andalusia in the past, and I've lived in Spain for a few years. But obviously, I've never been. I think I've been to Cordoba once for one day, and I've never been to Cadiz, but looking at maps and imagining and looking at old maps and trying to, that's one of the things I really enjoy doing, is getting a map, if you can, from like Roman times, and then a map from medieval times or later medieval, and trying to extrapolate between the two and trying to draw a line and work out which buildings were still there. I mean, it's a lot of work, but trying to understand what it might have looked like. And then at some point, like I said, going back to the original thing, at some point saying to yourself, okay, you've got enough of an understanding. As long as you're not mentioning buildings that haven't been built yet, most readers are not going to care, and they're not going to, from what you write, they're not going to pick up this incredibly detailed description of the city. So you need to paint the picture in broad brushstrokes, but you give it that authenticity because you've done the deep dive yourself.
Yeah. And I mean, it's the events that are clearly the problem, but on the other hand, the events are it's the story you're writing. I remember a reviewer said, in my second book on Last of the Romans, said, I would have liked more on the real events of the 5th century. And I'm thinking, well, so would I. But we don't know. We don't know
read a
anything
non-fiction
at
book.
all. Quite. Well, there won't be anything in there either because we
No,
just don't know.
but
And where we don't know, that's when you make
yeah,
stuff
and
up.
that's the job of
Basically,
historical fiction, and that's what historical fiction does. I think, it's
yeah,
poses those questions of what
yeah,
could have happened in the gaps that we.
Because I've
yeah.
had it the other way. Well, I'd have loved to have known more about Nicola's thoughts and feelings. And it's like, yeah, so would I. Because Nicola de la Haye is amazing, but nobody wrote down what she thought and felt. They just said she was acted manfully.
Yeah, it must be actually in many ways. I
Yeah.
think it's much more difficult to write non-fiction because you've got to actually back everything up.
Yeah.
Whereas we could just say at some point say, well, it seems reasonable, makes sense.
Yeah, yeah,
So, but where you can really go
yeah.
to town is your battle scenes, which are excellent.
Thank you.
How do you keep them edge of your seat? What's the secret?
I don't know. If there was a secret, I could probably make a lot of money telling people, selling the secret. I don't know. I don't know what the secret is, but I think there's a few things that I think have helped, which I've mentioned before when people have asked. And I did a masterclass on writing battle scenes or action scenes at one point. And one of the things I think is making sure that things are sequential and make sense. So every action has a reaction, there's cause and effect in everything. And one of the things I think really helped me sort of visualize this and put it into practice was playing lots of role-playing games, so Dungeons and Dragons and those type of tabletop role-playing games, because of course lots of that is based around combat, and lots of it, or all of the combat, is who has initiative, who strikes first. You roll a dice, does he hit? Does the other person get to defend against it? And so you're thinking very much in this sequential way. And then it's, yes, you do hit. How much damage did you do? Oh, is it a critical hit? Does the damage, cut an arm off, or does it kill them, or does it injure them? And so you're thinking in the game along the ways of how would a fight actually take place. So that I think really helps. And also I used to write technical writing, which again is procedural. So it's like, how do you install something? So 1, turn on your computer, 2, turn on your monitor, 3, do this. And so it's sequential, and you've got to make sure that the reader in technical writing has everything they need from the instructions to follow the instructions. And in a way, I think battle scenes are the same. You need to give people all the information they need to be able to visualize those battle scenes and those fight scenes. You don't need to do it all blow for blow. I think sometimes people fall into the mistake of thinking, okay, well, he said that, now I need to do every single blow. And then he moved his foot, an inch forward, and he swung the sword this way. And there's moments when you do that. And then there's moments when you step back and you leave a little bit more to the imagination. But I think I think of it very much like almost like a choreography, and think of it like in a movie as well. So I will try to choreograph things in the physical space that they're working in as well, and always try to think of something a bit original as well, something I haven't done, because they're invariably using the same types of weapons. It's always axes and swords and spears. There's not much else. And so if I can think of a way of bringing in another type of weapon, or somebody falls, or somebody uses part of the area around them to their benefit, I'll do that. Play on the terrain and all sorts of different things, that, like in this case we talked about bringing animals into fights as well, in the story. So we mentioned Abul Abbas, but there's also a lion that appears a couple of times, and so just having different things and trying to leave, like with all exciting scenes, or trying to make it exciting, trying to have mini cliffhangers, I think is another thing. Trying to leave the end of a scene on a note where you're not sure what's going to happen next, and so you need to turn the page to find out.
Absolutely. Yeah, you mentioned choreographing. I was going to ask you, as one who writes in a similar vein, do you choreograph a whole battle scene in advance, or do you just start writing it?
No, I don't. I definitely don't choreograph in advance the whole thing. And in fact, I don't really do many battle scenes. I normally do fight scenes. I'd say it's normally fights between 5 or 10 people. It's normally not huge battles. I don't think. I mean, I have done a few in Benicia Chronicles. There'll be like a few like clashes between soldiers, like proper ranks of soldiers and shield walls and things. But even then, I'll try to focus much more on the individuals. and really give a feeling
Yeah.
of the ebb and flow of the battle around them, but focus on the blow to blow fight and their emotions of the characters that we care about in the ranks. I'll have an idea of the outcome of the fight and maybe the terrain. I'm thinking where the fight is more complex and bigger. I'm thinking back to the first A Time for Swords novel. In that, I do remember, because it was sort of this Seven Samurai defense of a village monastery kind of situation. I think then have some. I doodled some maps and sort of had, there were barriers here and barricades here, and some soldiers would go here, and there's some arrows. They'll run this way when this happens. I had a little bit, because it was over several chapters, and it was sort of like things would happen off camera, as it were, and then people would have to run across to reinforce certain areas and things like that. And so it was a bit more complex. But if it's just a one-on-one fight, no, I just try to. I sort of know where it's going to go, and then halfway through the fight, I'll think, well, how do I get them to die? And then it maybe just at the beginning of the fight, I might suddenly have an idea. I mean, I've just finished writing book 11 of the Benicia Chronicles, and there's a duel in the first quarter of that, and I just suddenly thought, you sort of make sometimes you. Trying to make things original, I added a constraint to the duel, because I thought, well, this is Bearbrand in a duel against another warrior, champion of another country or another kingdom. This is obviously only going to end one way, right? I mean, Bearbrand's going to kill the other champion. So I thought, okay, I've got to put a constraint here. And so just before he starts the fight, the king says to him, by the way, whatever happens, you can't kill the other champion. And he's like, what are you talking about? It's a fight to the death. And he goes, well, not my problem. But, we're negotiating a peace treaty with these guys. You can't kill him, because that's going to ruin everything that I've planned. I'm the king. Do what I say. You can't kill him, but it's a fight to the death. So at that point, then I have to sort of rack my brains. Yeah, so he can kill you. And honestly, the king, if anyone's read the series, Oswy doesn't really give a toss whether Bearbrand lives or dies. He's like, well, you've caused this problem, whatever. You get killed, I don't care. So then you suddenly got that constraint, and then I had to sort of rack my brains, think, okay, how can I deal with this? How can he get out of this situation?
Yeah,
I'm not going to. I won't tell you how. Obviously.
Yeah, I mean, no, don't, no. No, I mean, I think what you were saying about drawing little maps and so on, where it's a fairly complex sort of environment that the fights are taking place in, and somebody's in one part of it and somebody else in another part, that's the bits where I always find it's the most difficult to keep in my head, not just my head, but to get clear in the reader's head where everybody is and what part they're playing. The smaller fights, individual fights, I think are a bit more.
And I think that's why in the bigger fights, I tried to focus on the small, like the people, the 2 or 3 people we care about in the middle, and the rest of it. Every now and again, you kind of, those characters will say, well, or through their point of view, they sort of think, oh, things have changed, something's happened, and then there's someone they'll look over and somebody shouts out and say, so and so's taken the left flank, and you go, oh my goodness, and there's suddenly a surge of the enemy pushes towards them, whatever, they realize they're losing, and so you kind of gloss over a little bit of that bigger picture, because I don't think I can get my head around it, really, the idea of like generals sitting on a hill going, send those 20,000 men over there to die. I just can't really understand how that works. So,
and also for the reader, it doesn't mean as much as if it's about the characters they've been following. So it kind of needs to focus on those, doesn't it?
Although I do like that in Dominion of Dust, the one person you don't have to focus on in a fight is Gizo, because he's always disappeared.
Well, I do like him as a character. I think he's definitely I think he's quite real as a proper sort of spy character. I think if you're going to be a spy, you don't stand and fight in a fight. You just you make sure you're somewhere else. And he always appears when he needs to appear, and he disappears when he's in danger. And leaving them.
But that bloke can get out of a windowless, doorless room, with no tunnel, no getting out of the top, but he'll get out of it somehow.
It's quite fun. It's quite fun to have a character like that, and not really explain too much about how he comes and goes. But he's obviously not all powerful, because things happen to him and he gets hurt, and so stuff does happen. But he's definitely a slippery, slimy character that will. and also you never really know. I think as the reader, you're not really sure. Even me as the writer, you're never really sure what his motivations are. Is he good? Is he bad? Is he somewhere in between? What's driving him? And well, that's quite ambiguous.
Yeah.
And you're never sure whether he's going to turn up to save the day. And that, in one fight, yes, he turns up and saves the day. In another, he's nowhere to be seen. And you're like thinking, is he going to turn up? Is he? No.
Yeah, exactly. And so they don't know. So Hunlaf and the others, they don't know, and they're very distrustful of him. But yeah, I really enjoyed his character. He appeared in the third book and has obviously come back in this fourth one. But I really liked him as a character. It's fun to write.
Yeah. Yeah, I hope he sticks around because he is interesting, and his relationship with Drosten is really interesting. There were a couple of side comments in the book this time, and it's like, oh yeah.
Yeah, Drosten's not particularly pleased with him, doesn't really like him very much.
Yeah. So those made me giggle.
So, what are you working on now?
I'm working on a new standalone novel set in a new time and place for me, which, of course, as I said before, I keep doing and then regretting and thinking, oh my God, I've got to study all this stuff. And of course, what have I chosen to write about now? Where have I chosen to set it? The most complex, rich historical environment possible, Imperial Rome. And so I've decided that although I know nothing about Roman history, I'm going to write a thriller set in 2nd century Rome.
Excellent.
In the city itself. A murder mystery, whodunit thriller, something. I haven't written it yet, so we'll see what it becomes as I write it. But I'm going through the process of research at the moment, and as I've got different events lined up over the next couple of weeks, I've kind of got to the point now that I've got lots of it in my head, kind of ideas. I'm sort of sketching down timelines and thoughts, but I haven't actually put pen to paper and started it. So that will be in November, really. I'll be starting that, and that will be I think I need to finish it by June next year, so I've got a few months, so hopefully I can get my head around it, and then that will be published in 2027.
Wow.
It's ridiculous. And then I've got in 2026 I've got Bernicia Chronicles 11 coming out. That's already finished. That's called Bane of Bernicia. And that's the one I was talking about with the duel with Bearbrand early on in the series, in the story. And on the 6th of November this year, just a couple of weeks' time, I've got Swords in the Snow coming out, which is the novella that I've co-written with Stephen A. Mackay. And that's set in his Forest Lord world. So there's Robin Hood and Friar Tuck and John Little John and all that lot. And so that's coming out, and that's just this morning. Stephen messaged me to say, oh, it's number 1 in the religious historical fiction chart or something, because it's all about a relic. You see, so it is, and it's a Christmas story, so it's a winter story, and it's about a stolen relic. So
you get to write about Robin Hood.
Well, I don't get to write about Robin Hood much. In fact, I don't get to write about him at all. But it's set in the 14th century, and so his chapters, we basically alternated chapters. We sort of came up with the structure and the storyline. His chapters are from the perspective of Little John and Friar Tuck, and mine are from the perspective of some new characters called Henry or Hal Turner. No, Tanner. Sorry, Tanner, not Turner. So Hal Tanner and William Wake, and a guy called Grimbold de Pendock, and there's a few other guys around. So I'm writing the anti-heroes, or
the villains,
the antagonists, the villains of the piece. Yes, William Wake is a very, very seedy character from York, organised crime lord of York, and Hal Tanner is an ex-soldier who fought at the Battle of Bannockburn and stuff, and his life has sort of hit the skids. And he's had a very dark past, and he's now working as like an enforcer for this guy, William Wake. And of course, there's a stolen relic. The bailiff, John Little, and with his friend Friar Tuck head off in search of the relic to get it back, because there's a sickly child who's dying, and they want the relic back because it has been proven to cure illness, and they want to get it back before she dies. And so they're in search for this relic. William Wake and his lot are trying to fob the relic off and sell it to someone else to make money. And their paths obviously cross at the end of the book. And there are swords in the snow, and there's a bit of blood in the snow as well.
That sounds brilliant. I'm looking forward to reading that.
Yeah, good title. Good title.
Yeah. Thank you. Another alliteration. Took us a while to come up with the title. We kind of going, well, what should we call it? We had all different ideas, and they kept on being similar. Basically similar to David Gemmell's titles. Originally we were saying we called, instead of Winter Warriors, we were going to call it Warriors of Winter, and then we thought they're not really all warriors, they're kind of brigands and bailiffs and stuff. So then we said, what about Swords in the Snow? And we said, there's a book of his called Sword in the Storm. We thought, Swords in the Snow.
Yeah, it's hard to find original titles, actually.
Yeah. And it's hard to find one when you think you've got a title and then you have discovered you can't use it, and then trying to find another one after that, because it's like, but I liked that one.
Yeah, that's always, it's horrible. I mean, I remember for Dark Frontier, the 19th century novel I wrote, that was the first title that I came up with. In fact, I was going to call Wolf of Wessex another standalone. This is, I've written a couple of standalones before, and Wolf of Wessex was originally, the working title was Dark Frontier. And because I thought it's like frontier, like Western kind of thing, but it's in the Dark Ages, so Dark Frontier. Actually, it was Robin Young, now Erin Young, who gave me the idea of the title. And I thought, that's a good title, Dark Frontier. I'll use it for Wolf of Wessex, but they didn't like it, the publishers. So then when it came to write Dark Frontier, the Western, I said, well, again, I think this kind of works with the theme and the storyline. Call it Dark Frontier. And they said, we don't like that. And maybe they were right. I mean, maybe they were right not to like it. Anyway, we went round the houses. At one point, I sent them 100 titles. Literally, I sent them a spreadsheet with 100 titles. I went on a random title generator, and I just started pulling out, and I ordered them by preference. And I still had Dark Frontier. In the end, after literally months, they said, okay, let's just call it Dark Frontier.
It's like, could have done that at the beginning and saved a lot of time.
Yeah.
So a question we've asking all our guests is, can you give us a fiction and non-fiction book recommendation?
Well, I can, and I will. I'll give you first, the non-fiction is linked to this book that I'm researching at the moment, and it's called Daily Life in Ancient Rome. And it's a book written in the 1940s, or published in the 1940s, by Jerome Carcopino. And it was originally written in French, and it's translated into English, and you can pick it up very, very cheap. The paperback is like £3 or something online. You can buy it secondhand or even new, I think, but very, very cheap. Daily Life in Ancient Rome, Jerome Carcopino. It's just a paperback with no pictures, but it just does what it says on the tin. And it's talking about at the height. So basically, it's writing exactly the time that I'm writing about, so at the height of Imperial Rome. 2nd century, I think, is focusing on, and he's basically saying this is how people lived. This is what, how they, but basically everything about daily life. So from food to clothing to shopping to sex, everything, the whole lot, religion, it covers everything. Slightly dated because it was written a long time ago, but it was recommended to me actually by Ian Ross, the writer who's written books about ancient Rome. And I was having a drink. He lives in Bath. He lives quite near me. We were having a drink a few weeks ago, and I was telling him that I'm writing this book, and he recommended it to me. And I'd already actually just ordered it like the day before or a week before. It hadn't even arrived. But he said it's a great book. He said, because since then, people that write about, there's lots of books about the daily life in Rome. And of course, the book that I'm researching, although it has some sort of tenuous links to the military and stuff, it's not about the military. It's about the life in Rome, and it's going to be about actually stuff happening in the streets of Rome. So I'm much more interested in the daily life and how people lived in Rome. And he said since then, he said many books have come out that because this book covered it in such great detail, they kind of gloss over lots of the details that he covers. So lots of the later books kind of assume, well, anyone who's studying this period will have already read that. And so they just don't mention. So he said, this is actually a great book to go back to. And so I've not read the whole book yet, but it's very, it's readable and it's interesting, and it's got a lot of wealth of data and detail in it. And as for my fiction books, that's the non-fiction. As for the fiction book, I was actually going to choose a book by Ian Ross himself. So Ian Ross, who recommended that for me, so he gets a second mention. And Battle Song, I think, is the first one of his trilogy that he wrote recently, medieval trilogy. And I absolutely loved it. It's the Norton trilogy, I think. So it's Adam de Norton is the main character. And I really, really, in fact, everything I've read of Ian's, I've read a couple of his Roman books, and I've read all three of the trilogy, the Battle Song, and this trilogy. And I've loved all of his stuff. I think he's an incredibly good writer. And really fun to read. Very, very readable. Talking about the authenticity, every time I read one of his books, I feel like it's real. I feel like this is exciting. It's plot driven, character driven. I love the characters. I'm interested, but it feels authentic, and it feels like everything that's happening, he's really done his research, and he knows his stuff. And he's, I mean, as far as I can make out, and from conversation with him, his books haven't done as well as they should, and I find it really disappointing. And it's, not, I'm sure we all would like our books to sell more than they do, but in his case, I mean, his books are fantastic, and they definitely should sell more.
It's surprising, isn't it? Because I agree totally with you. I mean, we've had him on the podcast as well, but it's a great series.
It is. It's an excellent series. It depicts the period really well, but it's not a period that often gets covered either. So,
I think, it's maybe not one of the sort of sexiest medieval periods. I mean, what we've found with the various things we've done over the course of the Middle Ages is that certain things are an absolute surefire. I mean, Wars of the Roses, absolute surefire. Doesn't matter what you're talking about in that topic, it will get listeners. And other things as well, other parts of it. But there are also some parts, whole swathes of medieval history that aren't so well known to start with, and getting them well known is a fairly slow business, perhaps.
He's a great writer. So anyone listening to this, if you're looking for a medieval story set in, I think is it 12th century? Trying to remember.
It's Henry III's reign.
It starts with Battle Song is about the 1264 Battle of Lewes. He really covers it well. His research is impeccable.
I think the thing is, everybody's heard of Edward I, but if you ask somebody about Henry III, they're thinking, now, which one was he? And they've really got no great, the word, broad brushstroke knowledge about Henry III at all, really.
It is interesting.
Which is interesting.
It's interesting just to know that some periods do better than others, and there's not really a great understanding of why, really.
My theory is that because Simon de Montfort, everyone talks about him as the kind of founder of Parliament. As soon as somebody mentions the word Parliament, eyes glaze over and interest wanes. But it's rather more than that. But strange. But I agree with you totally. He deserves a lot more readers.
Absolutely. I think the thing is that he, although
definitely.
For me, I mean, although his knowledge is incredibly deep, and he writes, obviously with great authenticity, and you believe it's very believable. The stories are very sort of character and plot driven, and about the smaller picture. So the big picture's happening, but it's not focused on the history of the kings in a boring, laborious way. I mean, they're living their lives entwined with what's going on in the world. But I think he does it very well. Anyway, that's enough of that. Enough about praising Ian Ross. There you go. You can buy me. If you're listening to this, Ian, that's another pint you're owing me.
Thank you very much, Matthew, for joining us. It has been an absolutely fascinating discussion.
Yeah, good to talk to you again.
Oh, thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it. It's been great fun, as always. And had a really, really good time. So thanks very much.
Yeah, take care.
So thank you very much to Matthew Harffy. Do get hold of his latest book, Dominion of Dust. You will not be disappointed. It's an excellent read. Thank you very much to Matthew Harffy for what was absolutely fascinating discussion, and for his book recommendations, which is a good segue to our next episode, which is our biannual book recommendations episode with authors such as Sarah Cockrell, Catherine Hanley, Scott Mariani, giving us their suggestions for what you should read before Christmas. I've been Sharon Bennett Connolly.
And I'm Derek Birks. You can find our podcasts on your favourite podcast provider, but you can also find them on YouTube. Just search on A Slice of Medieval. Don't forget to subscribe either on YouTube or on your podcast provider site. And it'd be great if you could give us some feedback in the form of a like or a comment if you have a minute. Thanks for listening.